gonna be pretty good size.
So it's good.
Yeah, I think it'll be get a lot. Much needed. Maybe third. We're ready for it. And then I'll have a warehouse off the north of it. Storage, so get some trailers out of copies. So if you look at where the prom center kind of sits like this, it would go off of this. So if they kind of got planned like a 2-story, maybe down like a those things that could walk out over here on this is the south side. And then you got like the parking lots kind of going like this, and then a warehouse or that would be attached. That would have good access to it.
I was looking very
Drive through kind of bays what I'm looking for. Okay. Rack storage. And that's the plan.
That'd be good.
You can be called the chart center. I would hope not. I told you everything. There you go. I don't know. Year and a half.
Yeah, right.
Sorry.
Like, is there an expectation to stand and present or?
No, I think you're sitting and talking, so it's have to pass the mic back and forth, so I don't think you have to stand.
For the warning for some, watch all those slides.
I think it'll be coming up behind here. Yeah, I'll be behind you. I think it's where the computer's right over here. I think they've already got it already down there. And then this is the mic and the owl, so it's we're live now. So.
You're not gonna be right in the front row? Start. The second row is actually pretty tough. Second row.
You want to come up here?
Yeah. Look at you. You're on TV. Doesn't make sure that it doesn't mean everything's gonna run smoothly.
Great. Yeah, really good attendance. Had about 30 people in it.
That's awesome.
People from along the front range. So yeah,
Where do you
feedback. I do it at HQ. Yeah, feedback is really strong. 400 next one. Yeah, it says 400.
I'm your student.
Oh, nice.
I'm gonna retake it.
Good. I'm gonna go to the L980 incident commander course next week. We come back and build a local version of it. And I'd like to get a command college established. Where then guys like him and others with the curriculum built and just kind of get everyone to go through it. Because I said, who's bringing incident command? Be on 300-400, like the road version. And everyone's like, God, that's a great question. I think it's all done in training. So like, you should probably change that. So, yeah, so I want to get like a local certification around that. And then, I'll write it in EOP. You got to take 300, 400, 191, whatever we call it. Yeah. That's what I'm going down. Pull that to Curtis Social. Let's go in and get that. Right, so see what they're doing, bring it back. And I put in for my ICP3 just 3 states, drop one, just see how they do.
Who receives that?
There's a lot of people that
Gets
yeah, they would die. They would die. I'm gonna go for direct entry. They have like 92 IPs. I've done that much incident command work over the last 3 years before they was all the different things. So, never use it. It's really just get yeah. You know, I'm tracking. Yeah. Thanks for all the work on the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
How you feeling about it? Feeling good?
I think so, yeah.
Good.
And my part is gonna be so brief. I'm like, here you go, and now come to session 6.
That's great.
Are you changing slides for the presentation?
I already took mine out preemptively, so you can go,
No, are you the MC or something?
I don't know. Maybe,
Since I got invited probably to give us some presentation.
uh-huh. Yeah, I think like, if. Yeah, I think, are you gonna be working the slide?
We're still figuring that.
All right,
Just might have to just open mic it.
yeah. 7-minute
Do
stand-up
you have
set.
your- do you have
Set how
your
ready.
slides presentation on your computer? There you go. You'd be great.
The same room.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. We just passed the computer. around.
Yeah.
We've not yet.
I'm there.
Okay, so when you're ready to use it, just push that up.
Okay, thank you.
Good. I think I'll lead it.
Yeah.
Screen first.
Are you gonna reset that?
Yeah, I'm trying. For everybody watching at home, we're just working through some technical challenges. We'll get started in a few minutes.
So HDMI 3s or.
Yep. I know it was.
Thanks, everybody, for your patience. I'm gonna quick share problem here.
Did have an issue over the weekend, but I thought they said they got it fixed.
Why don't we try two again? Because,
Yeah.
you had it before, but I could never get it.
It won't even do this before you got it. to
Ran
come up,
home.
and then it would connect to your computer.
Yeah, normally I'm on.
So this is.
Not bad.
I wondered if we have the right one.
It says, I mean, it's Brooks.
No, I think we
Well, this is.
shared.
That's just a set of.
Room to write on here.
That's before I kick all the boards off the table.
Yeah.
It will kill the hour.
Yeah, folks at home will go on an adventure. If that's the case.
Got it.
There we go.
Yeah. We're in.
Nice. Okay.
You were.
So,
Come on.
Whatever you just did. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
hey,
Okay, thanks so much, everybody. Sorry for the delay. I'm Megan Davis. I'm from the city of Louisville, and Lisa's gonna be running both the PowerPoint and the webinar, so hopefully everything goes smoothly from here on out, but we'll have to practice some patience to make sure that we can see everything we need to when we need to. So Lisa, I think we'll probably just see this screen the entire time.
So you're gonna see whatever I'm looking at, so let me share. I need to
Probably gonna
share
be
my
most of the-
screen online.
Okay, well, thanks so much for being here this evening. It's nice to see everybody and some people who have been here for the other programs as well. We are really excited this evening to have a chance to talk to some of our experts here in the community in Boulder County, and including some of the Louisville, members of the Louisville team, Boulder County, Mountain View Fire District, and the Office of Disaster Management. So we're going to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves here in a minute, but this is the third program that we have in the joint series between Louisville, unincorporated Boulder County, and the town of Superior. So we want to thank town of Superior and Boulder County for joining us in providing some opportunities for education and outreach around wildfire mitigation, emergency notification, and other relevant issues to be prepared as a community for future disasters. So this is our next session is going to be on reducing risk at home. So that'll be on home hardening opportunities and kind of techniques. That'll be on February 27th. And that'll be also here in the rec center as well as online. So we'll have a webinar for option for all of these. They are being recorded. So if you're not able to attend, they're available on the City of Louisville and Town of Superior websites. We have it under our I can't remember the section, a Resilient Louisville section on the webpage. So if you go to the Resilient Louisville tab, then you will be able to find all these presentations. So tonight's presentation, like I said, is going to include local experts. We're going to talk about emergency preparedness, emergency systems, notification. And I just want to recognize that, you know, this is a difficult conversation for us in Louisville Superior, unincorporated Boulder County, having come through a significant disaster. And so please, if you have, you know, if you're feeling like this is a difficult conversation, you can listen to it later, or if you just feel like you want to talk to us in person, or you want to get the information another way, then just let us know and we'll be happy to accommodate how you might need to hear more information in the future too. We're going to be looking forward tonight and focusing on how we as a community can be better prepared for future disasters. However, much of the information and the updates that you will hear tonight that we're going to be providing reflect on changes and improvements that have been made as a result of the Marshall Fire. We have taken some of the information and recommendations that came from the after action report and from the facilitated learning analysis. If you haven't had a chance to review those are also available on the Louisville website. Documents that provide kind of some background information on the event itself and how the response went and what some opportunities were for improvement. So we've been working on a lot of those areas and want to share that with you as well. So we're going to provide some practical information tonight for the community members on how you can be better prepared, how we can all be better prepared, as well as some of these updates on preparedness efforts. We will have time for questions at the end. The rec center closes at 8 p.m. So we have a hard stop at 8 p.m. this evening, and we will be taking questions from people in the room as well as on the webinar. And so we would like you to hold your questions till the end. And we're going to go through our panelists and we'll have them give their presentations. Okay. All right. Okay. Let me start with the mic here. I'm going to pass it down and allow each of our guests to give an introduction, and then we'll get started with the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dave Beebe. I'm the fire chief of Mountain View Fire Protection District.
Good evening, all. My name is Jeff Fisher. I'm the interim police chief, of the City of Louisville.
My name is Steve Silverman. I'm the 911 communications director for the county dispatch center.
David Solomon, I'm a sergeant with Boulder County, currently in charge of the town of Superior.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Chart. I'm director with the Office of Disaster Management for the City of Boulder and Boulder County.
I'm Monica Weber. I'm one of the coordinators with the Office of Disaster Management, Boulder Office of Disaster Management, and I work with all of our preparedness community programs.
Okay. All right, we can give just a quick overview of the agenda for this evening. We're gonna just kind of give an introduction, and then we'll talk a little bit about alert and warning systems, and then we'll talk about preparedness and evacuation, and then at the end, as I mentioned, we'll have some time for Q&A. The other thing that I wanted to share tonight, go to the next slide, is that actually go to the next slide. Is that we have Everbridge sign up that is happening here. So Allison from Superior is here to help us sign up. If you haven't signed up, she can kind of walk you through it. We have some laptops that you can go ahead and sign up. And then we have the information that we have provided online as well, so that people at home who are listening can also go and sign up and make sure that you are getting those notifications. Okay, now let's get started. I think Mike and Monica are going to start.
Steve is up.
Steve is gonna go
Yep.
first on
Steve's
the
up
alert.
first. Okay.
warning, yeah.
Great.
I got the slides behind me and in front of me manually, so bear with me, because I'm gonna follow my slide and we'll have a lot of time at the end for questions. So next slide, please. And I'm not sure if they're animated or not. Okay, so I'm here to talk to you guys about alert and warning systems that are in place today and how each one of those work. First of all, alert and warning, I'm going to talk about terminology. First of all, initiating alert, then terminology of what types of terms that we use, so you can be familiar with them. And then I'm going to talk about delivery methods, developing a footprint, how we decide what area is going to be notified, and then a little bit about what's coming soon this year in the first and second quarter. Next slide, please. All right, first of all, I think we're blocking the bottom line here, but we've got incident command, dispatch, and public, an arrow on the bottom. So this slide is representing an initiative, what it takes to initiate an alert. What public safety professionals in the field feel there's a necessity to let the public know, and our residents and community members and visitors know that something's going on. It starts with incident command, and incident command is usually fire or law, or fire and law in the field. Once they determine a need to do emergency notification, they'll holler at the dispatch center, usually over the radio, sometimes by phone. And they'll let us know exactly what they're looking for. I'm going to go through what that information is in a second. And we as the dispatch center then facilitate that emergency notification to whatever is deemed necessary by the incident commanders on scene. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a question? Do they, when the guys in the field, do they go only to one place, or do they have to try to figure out, do I call the county, do I call the city, what do they do?
Great question. So the question was, do the folks in the field know who to ask for? Is that correct? When it comes to an emergency alert, it's going to depend on the home agency's dispatch center. Okay, so the responding agencies will work through whoever they normally work through day to day for dispatch operations. You're welcome. So this is an animated slide, so there's a handful of things on here. So the first bullet point that I have up here on emergency alerts is a layered approach, and we think of it like a fancy club sandwich. And the first layer in that alerting mechanism is you. It is us. It is having the personal awareness of what's going on around us, knowing what situation you're in the moment, and being aware of what is happening around you, so you can make decisions for yourself. And you can make decisions for your neighbors, your family, your pets, anybody that you're responsible for. The first stop is you. And when I say you, it's all of us. It's me, it's my family, it's my neighbors, being aware of that. The next bullet point is door to door. Our professionals sitting right next to me are in charge of people that are literally in the field, on the ground, the boots on the ground, going door to door. It's really important that they are considered part of that emergency notification process. Oftentimes we forget what our police and our fire units and our EMS and our search and rescue are doing on the ground. And they're going door to door, trying to alert the people that are around them and in the areas that they're. Next bullet point is going to be neighbors to neighbors. One thing that we really saw during most recent disaster, the Marshall Fire, and honestly we saw in others throughout the county and all of our careers, is the value of neighbors helping neighbors, knowing your neighbors, knowing their limitations, knowing their capabilities, and if you're home, being available to help them. It's essentially crowdsourcing assistance during a major disaster. Next bullet point is going to be a list, and you can go, yep, they all appear. And I know my head's probably blocking it for those in the room, but I'll read them off. The first one is in our emergency alert system, and that is our capability of sending messages out electronically to various devices that might be in your pocket or on your wall at home. And the first one is landlines. The second one is going to be opt-in or sign up, and I know there's computers here available, and the folks online can access that. The third is texts. We can send you texts. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper in a slide or two on each one of these, just so you know. If you're thinking about questions, I might answer them in a minute. Next is email. We can send email, and we can also send a fax. Those of you that still have a fax machine laying around the house, we can send messages through that, as crazy as it sounds today. The next piece of the alert and warning sandwich is going to be IPAWS, or the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. That is a federal system that I'm going to go a little bit deeper on in a couple slides. But it is a system that we have access to through our software, but we don't coordinate or manage that system. And that's where you're going to get the wireless emergency alerts, or what you see in that bullet point of WEAs, NOAA weather alerts, and missing one. The EAS, the emergency alerting system, sorry. And we'll talk about that in a second. Sirens is another piece of the alerting sandwich. And then also social media and PIO involvement from the folks, groups that are sitting up here and any other public entity, the information getting pushed out through those resources that push information. PIO, thank you. And if I speak in any of us speak in an acronym, please ask right away. You don't have to hold that question to the end. Public Information Officer is a PIO. That is the position on the law or fire agency that is responsible for explaining things to the public in terms that are not acronyms. I'm not a PIO. So next slide. All right, our next slide is our terminology. Before I put a bunch of words up here, I'm just going to be very short and sweet and simple. We have three terms. The severity, I'm talking about severity of the message. It's going to be an advisory, a warning, or an order. An advisory message is one where we say, hey, be aware something's going on that might impact you. A warning is going to be a message that comes to you that says, something's happening, it's likely going to impact you. If you need any extra time to get up and move and take action, do it now. We use the word pre-evacuation. We do not use that word anymore because we want people to take action immediately when we use a warning. And lastly, an order. An order is defined as an imminent threat to life that's occurring right now that is likely impacting you. Next slide, please. So that's the severity terms. Now I'm going to talk about the actions that were being requested. So every emergency alert is going to have a severity and it's going to have an action requested. Evacuation is get up and move to another location. That's the request. Next one is climb to higher ground, which is most commonly used in a flooding situation. Third is going to be our shelter in place, which is where you are. Take cover. It might be go to your basement if it's a tornado. It might be stay in your house if it's a armed suspect in the area. But we don't want you to leave where you are. Lastly, we have a missing endangered person message. Anytime we want to alert the public to maybe assist us and keep an eye out for somebody that might be missing endangered, we would use that type of alert. And finally, an all clear. We almost always will send an all clear message when the situation has resolved itself or public safety officials deem it appropriate for everybody to go back to what they were doing prior to the alert. Next slide, please. Talk a little bit about developing a footprint. And when I talk about a footprint, that would be as if you were standing on a map. You know, what is the area that public safety officials determine we need to notify the community or its visitors? We have a number of ways that we can do this. The first ones on this slide right now are the simplest ways. And those are, you can do a radius in the system. We can pick a radius from an intersection, from an address, from a common building, and we could say 1/2 mile, 1 mile, and it automatically draws a circle. And anybody within that circle is going to get notified. We also have what we call polygons. And a polygon in our world is a shape that's defined in the emergency alerting system that is preset for a specific location. And if you can see behind me, on the map, the biggest picture is the picture of our countywide polygons. Every inch of the county, every municipality has some sort of polygon. And the public safety officials for each jurisdiction is the one that determined what those look like. For us, we will pick those in our system and send them out to those that are within those polygons. And I apologize, my screen just went blank. So those are the two simplest ways. And the reason why they're the simplest is because everything's preloaded into the system on the polygon side. And all these guys have to do is ask for a certain letter and numerical value, and we know which one to select. And that radius is super easy because the system can generate it. Next slide, please. The a little bit less simple is going to be a request for us to either draw a polygon, which is up here on the top right corner of your screen. And that would be our public safety officials saying, I need it from this street on the north side, this street on the south side, and the same on the east and the west. And lastly, we have flood polygons, which are also very quick and easy to request in a flooding situation. We have preset these specific to each drainage. We work with FEMA, we work with local hydrologists, and then we expanded it just a little bit, just to have a little bit of an insurance policy for having a little bit extra space. And we can send those anytime there's a flooding situation that's affecting any of our drainages in Boulder County. Next slide. This slide is going to be a picture of the opt-ins. So you can see that there's some red dots and there's some bluish purple dots on there. To us, those that are sending these messages, those are every landline or every opt-in. One is one color, one is the other. So we get an idea of who we're sending them to and the density of community members that have signed up. If you have a landline, which just out of curiosity in this room, raise your hand if you still have a landline. And a landline to us would be a Lumen or CenturyLink, or formerly known as Quest hard copper line, or potentially a Comcast or Xfinity voice over IP. Those two companies, awesome. A lot of people actually have it. Those two companies provide us those landline data or voice over IP or CenturyLink or for Comcast. They provide us that information 4 times a year. And for those new accounts, we've added in, and any old account that was closed, we take it out. If you have one of those lines, you are automatically in the system. However, we encourage you to sign up. Absolutely sign up in addition to having your landline, because you can choose the path at which you want to follow. For example, I live in unincorporated Boulder County, so I have my address. I have up to 5 addresses under my account, just like you can. My home address is in unincorporated Boulder County. My wife is a teacher in the city of Boulder, where my kids go to school too, so I have that address in there. My in-laws live in Longmont. My work is in Boulder City, so I have 4 or 5 addresses listed on my account. If you sign up just like that, anytime we draw a shape around any one of those addresses, you will be notified in the ways that you have chosen to be notified. And that goes back to that first slide, which is text, email, phone, voice, fax. You want a fax, you can do that too. So your choice. We'll hold the questions to the end. So it sounds like we probably will have a handful of them.
It was just confusing whether or not that was landline or that was Everbridge.
Okay, so the question is there's some confusion on the term landline versus Everbridge? Is that what you're saying?
You were saying you could opt in with multiple addresses.
Correct.
Was that with Everbridge?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. So the clarifying request is, when I was speaking about opting in, when you opt in, you sign up, and the company that we use is called Everbridge. So you're signing up with the software, and there's a link to do that. You can choose up to 5 addresses. That process, those 5 addresses, and any path that which you wish to receive the message, text, voice, email, so on and so forth, is separate from the landlines. We automatically have the landlines in the system, and then you can choose to sign up under your account. You can have up to 5 addresses, and then you can pick the paths at which you want to get the messages by your choice. Yes.
I don't see a siren in these various options.
Correct. So the previous slide showed all the different layers of which we may choose, meaning these folks next to me may choose to use sirens are one of them. And it's up to the field to determine if we want to use the sirens. Historically, they've been used for flood,
We didn't use them this time.
for the Marshall fires, which is,
Yes.
and those questions would have to go to these folks on those decision-making processes. But the sirens are a part of the options moving forward
I
with,
didn't hear it. I mean, it didn't happen.
and I understand that. I'm not sure.
I'm 2 blocks from here.
Okay,
and
let's hold these questions till the end. We're still getting information. There's a lot more information that's gonna be shared, and then you might hear more about these issues, and then we can get questions at the end. Thank you.
Let me continue with systems. So next slide is going to be our iPod slide, which is the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. This is a federal system that is used in conjunction with the software that I just mentioned. Anytime there is an imminent threat to life, we are going to be sending what we use, the term we use, iPods, or Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. In that package is a wireless emergency alert, most commonly known to the average person as an Amber Alert style message. Not a text, but it comes across just like an Amber Alert. We also have the emergency alerting system, the EAS, which is if you still have TV, broadcast television, the ticker that comes across the bottom of the screen, if you're in your car, the alerting obnoxious noise that comes loud across your speakers, all of those are generated from the EAS system. We also have a NOAA weather radio is an option in the iPods package. So all 3 of those are voluntary, meaning it's up to the providers to decide whether they're going to send it. For example, one of these guys requests we send an emergency alert. We push it through our system through the methods that we just mentioned. Once it goes to the iPod system, which is that Amber Alert style, the EAS emergency alerting system, and then over the radio, it's up to those providers. So Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, T-Mobile, your networks on the TV side, your radio networks on the broadcast side, they receive it and they make a decision on whether they're going to rebroadcast it or not. It's out of our hands at that point. Most of the cell providers are going to sit and look at that footprint that I just talked about and say, okay, where are my people, meaning their customers, in that footprint? Is there a tower that's just outside that shape or that polygon that we drew? And they may stretch it and make it bigger. And that's up to them to do that because they know where their people are connected to. We don't have control over that. They also could say, I'm not going to send it at all. This isn't important to us. Once again, out of our control. So once it leaves our system, it's up to those providers to make that decision. The entire iPod system is completely voluntary by all of those networks and all of those private cellular providers. One of the aspects that the law enforcement professionals in front of me always think about is the impact of a wireless emergency alert during some sort of law enforcement type situation where there might be an armed suspect. They will consider this before they tell us to push it out or not. One of the concerns is if there's people hiding in places during an active harm incident, if we send an emergency alert that includes that wireless emergency alert, it could give up hiding places. It could give up some of that information to the suspect. So these are all decisions that those that are sitting here on the panel are going to make before they make that request to our dispatch center to push that out. Some of the limitations to the wireless emergency alerts are the number of sides that we can draw on a shape, the number of shapes that we can actually put into the system. Those 2 pieces on the mapping side are something we always consider. The other limitations to the system are the software on each person's phone. So there are different versions of that wireless emergency alert software. There's version 1, there's version 2, and version 3. If you have an older phone, you may have version 1. Version 1 software only will receive 90 characters. And if you've ever used word count in a Word document, 90 characters is a very short amount. So we have to get a message and craft a message where we're used to using an unlimited or quite a few characters in a very short amount because we have to accommodate to those that have older phones. And that's a limitation of the system. If you have a version 2 or a version 3 phone, you likely get up to 360 characters in a wireless emergency alert. If you have a version 3 phone, it will be able to determine your location within 1/10 of a mile of that shape that we drew. I know I'm throwing a lot of detail and technical things out at you guys, and I completely understand if some of this is confusing you. There's a lot to understand with emergency alerts. I think the biggest message that we want to get across is once it leaves our system and goes to some of the other systems, there are limitations to it and we don't have control over it. We are doing our best to influence those at a federal level to make those changes. And it's not just us. I can promise you, it's dispatch centers, emergency managers, and public safety officials across the country are working with the FCC to make better changes to that system. But there is no perfect system. And if you go back to that, if you think back to that first slide where the U was at the top, that's why it's most important for personal awareness and being aware of what's going on around you, because even if we send and we do our best that we can to get stuff out, we're determined on technology sometimes for that receiving of that side of things.
Sorry.
One more thing. So we are in a world of smartphones and many different apps out there and app providers grab information from other sources and redistribute it. It could be Nextdoor, it could be Facebook, it could be Twitter, it could be a person that posts something. When some of those apps grab information, sometimes they only grab part of it. And what we've experienced in the past when we send an emergency alert is part of that message is not what we want to get out. We want the full message out or as best as we can. So understanding that some of these apps, especially the ones that you can sign up for that are not directly related to our systems, may not provide that full message for you or be partial. So that gets me kind of into the next part of it, which is what will be presented to you. And so my next slide, go ahead. I'm going to go through these quick. I don't expect you to sit there and read them because they're detailed. These are the forms that the 911 dispatcher fills out to get the information to you in whatever manner you've chosen. The examples of these next 3 slides are all the different things that we have to fill out. Go ahead to the next one. Once we fill out a bunch of fields that are in a form, it aggregates the information, and then we have to wordsmith it so it makes sense. Next slide. We make sure the correct things are selected when it comes to what pathways we're sending it out. Next slide. We review everything. Next slide. Now we get to the wireless emergency alert piece where there's that 90 character and the 360 character and then the full message. We have to go through and make sure each one of those makes sense because we want to, everybody that has a different device and different technology should at least get the bare minimum of information. Next slide. Every time we send an alert, whether it's an advisory, a warning, or an order, whether it goes to just your cell phones or WIA or any of the systems I've already talked about, you will always get a link in that message, whether it's your email or your text. That link will take you back to a page that has the complete information. And that complete information is going to be a map, a zoomable map. So you can say, I'm standing here, I'm looking at the shape that they're trying to tell people to do. Am I impacted? Additionally, it'll take you back to the full message. So even if you have a limiting character on your phone, you should be able to see once you get back to that web page on what the full message is. All of those messages, whether they're from the link on your phone or boulderoem.com, there's a link on their webpage to get back to all the recent or active messages. Go ahead, next slide. This is what it looks like. So your full message is going to be all the words that we choose, and then the map. And that's the map that you can click on. I know it looks like a little shape on the screen, but when it's active on your phone, you'll be able to click on that, zoom in to figure out where the impacted area might be, or actually is what these guys are telling us to do. Just know that if you receive an alert on your phone, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be impacted right away. It's really important that you look back on that message, what we're trying to tell folks, and then where that message is trying to be relayed to see if you are actually being impacted. Because of those limitations on the systems that we just talked about, the messages can go far beyond that shape that we draw on the map. That's why it's really important that we provide the right information for you. Next slide. Coming soon, coming soon. A few really nice things that we're working on. We've purchased a new layer of data or information in the Everbridge software. It's called Resident Connect. That's just the term that they use. It's essentially public sourced data, whether it's mortgage statements or any kind of public information database. It looks at the phone number, it looks at the address, and it adds that information in there. All of it is public sourced information. Additionally, we will be translating all wireless emergency alerts in Spanish automatically. So if as a person in the community, if I've set my phone to the Spanish settings, it will come across my phone in Spanish. Additionally, we are adding what's called ReachWell. ReachWell is an app that we've contracted with that has the ability to translate all emergency alerts or all messages that we send in up to over 100 different languages. It uses Google Translate, but then it also has artificial intelligence to be able to translate in a better dialect for the different communities. A lot of people have had challenges with the way Google Translate presents words and phrases. This actually has artificial intelligence on top of it to make it much better. So that's coming soon in the first quarter. And lastly, we are providing new educational materials. Everything I talked about, along with these coming soon, exciting new features that we're adding to the system, all of that will be presented in simple to understand training materials, charts, graphs, things like that, that we'll be able to push out through the folks sitting up here and your city and town community leaders. I can't remember if I have another slide. I think that was it.
I'll take it from there.
That's it.
All right, so the alerts are out. Now the other side of this is then messaging. So think of it, there's public alerting, public messaging. So once you get the alert, how do you stay current with the information that you're experiencing? What sort of situational awareness can you develop? And that is where our PIOs within the departments have a role during that very early on phase. What Steve has with the earlier slide that shows the map and the messaging is our first way and attempt to keep you current with the information that has gone out from the 911 center. The PIOs will then, the public information officers, start to engage the incident, and then they're starting to push information out on boulderoem.com, or they'll be doing it on Twitter, Facebook, and other social media outlets to try to make sure that whatever information they can get from the incident commander is being updated. The EOC gets activated, and that is in a 1 to 3 hour range, the Emergency Operations Center. And what we do, we're a support coordination center that supports the incident commanders for resources, information. We bring in a lot of our city and county departments that have a functional role in being able to open shelters, take care of animals, provide transportation. Public information is one of the critical tasks we have. We then will bring that PIO effort or that public information effort into the EOC, and we'll bring city and county PIOs together to center that effort and kind of create a joint information system. And this is where, if Louisville was starting to be impacted, ideally then we'd be able to, if there is a PIO that is identifiable, bring them into the system and start just kind of building that capacity outward as more and more communities are affected. A map gets generated, and one of the things we want to talk about, City of Boulder, you may have seen some of this in the newspaper. Zone Haven is a situational awareness and messaging tool platform. It helps support that public alerting. It has the polygons forward facing, and it's on a website. The county does not have that currently, but we just had our first contract talk with the company, and we're in the process of negotiating that capability and bringing it to the remainder of Boulder County. So that would cover Louisville, Lafayette, Erie, all the other municipalities. And then we will have one situation awareness map, because right now we have two, one for the city, Zone Haven, then we have one that's on our website. You'll see that's sort of the county map, and you almost would have to toggle between the two. So everything will be on one map eventually, and that'll help with giving you a map that lets you see things in its entirety. The alerts that and the shapes that Steve was showing you, that's like a slice in time. It shows you the one alert you got. It doesn't show you sort of the build out. but that's where that map would show that. All the alerts that are going out and the changes to those shapes would start popping up. It'd be color coded. It also would have what status the zone is in. And then it's also another way for the public information officers to post information on the site and help you kind of keep current. And then what becomes next important for you is what roads are closed, where are the shelters, when is it all clear, when can I go home? And those sort of things then become part of that messaging effort and then show up on the map to try to communicate the current status of where we are on things. So that's the two pieces: public alerting, public messaging, and that's sort of the span of that capability that we're trying to develop and improve upon. Megan, do you want to go to questions now, or do you want to move into preparedness a little bit?
Yeah, you want questions on this section?
Yeah, if you like. It's
Can you go back to that QR code and move Emily's?
Yeah, sorry.
We're gonna use the mic for questions because then the people online can hear.
I'm Ann Brennan. We lost our house right across via Appy over here.
Mhm.
One question related to your talk that you just gave about PIOs is, I got home around noon. I turned the TV on immediately. There was nothing in the news yet. When it eventually came, the report was that the entire town of Superior, their neighborhood, whatever it is. Thank you, Sagamore, which they said was right behind Costco. So I knew where that one was.
Mhm.
And Paragon Estates were all being evacuated. I have no idea the names of neighborhoods. So that said to me, we were safe because I didn't know where Paragon Estates was, but they were evacuating Superior. So I assumed it was over there.
Mhm.
And I'll ask the second part of my question later. But the PIO has to help the media
Mhm.
be more accurate because we didn't know it had already crossed 36 at
Mhm.
12:30 and was blowing towards us because of the way the report went out.
Mhm.
Is there anything you can do to address that going forward, do you think?
Well, obviously, there are things we can do to try to be better in that space. The early on, sorry, I shouldn't be talking until I get the mic. My apologies. It's a great question. So the thing that happens early on in incidents like this, where you have a fast moving fire too, is that it's moving sometimes faster than you can know where it's heading perhaps. And things are obstructing the views. And I don't want to talk for the police or fire on that because I'm back in the EOC and we're setting things up. So we're relying heavily on things we're hearing coming across dispatch, if we have access to that, or reports coming in from the field. And that's where the PIOs are kind of grabbing that information. So there's a little bit of a blind spot that'll occur. And what we're trying to do in our efforts are trying to get that connection and that interface to the incident commanders that are out in the field as quickly as we can, and then try to get the information from them to be able to kind of know what needs to be messaged. And we try to do that also by listening to what's going on in dispatch, but there is definitely a difficulty initially on getting the information on that messaging side. And I would say there's probably an imbalance there, where there's hopefully a lot of alerting going out. And the best we can do in the messaging in that space is what you saw with the alert page, making sure you understand the polygons that are going out, making sure that you get the messaging that tells you what to do right away. And then, we are trying to get whatever information we can out to the media. So we definitely are always looking at how we can improve our capability around that. But with the EOC side, there is a time. It's 1 to 3 hours for us to stand up and get things rolling because we have people responding in. They're not at the EOC, 24/7, like a watch center environment. So we have to bring people in from their other duty assignments. And that just takes some time to get people engaged and get their situational awareness up and be able to know how and where we need to message. So that may have been what led to some of that distortion early on, but we expect that to be much tighter as we move forward in the incident.
We're gonna take one on the online here, like Jill Minter, you're next, you'll have to unmute on your side.
Yes, so can you hear me? This is Jill Minter.
We can.
Okay. I live on West Mulberry Street where many homes were lost. And I know exactly what happened that day. And My husband, daughter, and I, we were all signed up for the Everbridge to be alerted by our phones, and we never got an alert until 2:51. There was a map that was published that showed the different zones, and for some reason, the zone that we live in wasn't notified for 90 minutes after the surrounding zones. And we were very alarmed by that more than anything else because we have a daughter with a disability that cannot drive. And it's really critical that we are notified as soon as possible so we can make arrangements for her departure. So I don't know why our zone was notified so late, and I don't know what has been put in place to prevent that from happening again. So if you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I don't know who wants to start. I don't know if, from the Louisville's perspective, I think what Mike Charge has shared in terms of the sort of intelligence on the ground and not knowing exactly where the fire was at every moment because it was moving so fast and hopping around so much. So that was a piece of that. The other piece is something that we'll talk about here in the next, are we going to talk a little bit more about the evacuation? Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about the zones and evacuation. So I think we have done some work to pre-identify the evacuation zones. So that's loaded in the system already so that we're able to more quickly execute on those. And so that is something that will help. And there may be some other feedback too.
So I'll go ahead and address what I can on the question. So as far as specifically what happened in Louisville around these decisions, I don't have the fidelity in that decision making. Everything is generated by the incident commanders. But what I can tell you moving forward, ma'am, and understanding that dilemma that obviously is a very real concern in the future, what we have identified in a group that ODM, Office of Disaster Management, brought together was an evacuation group after the Marshall Fire that helped generate those polygons for the planes, also helped establish primary evacuation routes for each one of the polygons so that those routes can be identified. I'm sure everyone here understands the congestion that was involved, probably very much so in the city very early. And that we experienced was if we can keep the primary arteries moving, then the neighborhood level streets will at least have some forward activity as opposed to total gridlock. And in that effort, we also identified traffic control points. There's just not enough officers physically on the street of a fire that size to put an officer at every intersection. But what we did notice, and I'll let the officers here refer to that, is where we could get traffic control points established. What came out in the after action was that did release that pressure pretty dramatically and was able to keep things moving. I won't say it's going to be like a low traffic day, but it does keep things progressing. And part of that discussion came out of it was jurisdictional decision-making is, I think before that, it was every jurisdiction is making decisions in the interest of their community. And then that maybe chilled decisions when you had the fire that was going across jurisdictional lines. And with the polygons now that are located on the plains, many of those polygons are going across fire district lines, city lines, and the decision collectively made by all the police and fire chiefs that were in the room was make the call, do not wait for authorization from a local jurisdiction to launch. So that would mean then that the sheriff's department or a fire department could make a call based around the situation they have in front of them, regardless if it was their jurisdictional authority or not. It would be to create the evacuation order or warning and launch that immediately without hesitation. And that was adopted across the board. So that is a major change around those things that can create delays in decision-making, confusion, add to it when it's hard enough already to process. The other part of that work was that we'd established a metric or benchmark around how long it should take to generate a message in the field to the launch time. And it was under 15 minutes is the idea behind, or the goal, when these decisions are made. So from the time an incident commander gets on scene, evaluates, sizes up, calls in Steve, he goes through his techniques in the 911 center, and goes out the door. In our most recent fire in Sanitas and also in NCAR, we are finding that we're meeting that metric. So that is also meaning the speed to notify has been dramatically reduced. I'm saying, yeah, reduced in the time it takes to get you when I want to make sure I have that right. And also making sure that we use the warnings and advisory more. And this fire was moving so fast, it was hard, it was compressed. But in other ways, if there's times there to get the advisories out to help generate awareness in the community, and the warning for your situation specifically is why we moved to that warning messaging. We didn't want to use voluntary or pre-evac because folks that do have family members that need some additional assistance, or you have large animals or pets and things like that, that may be your time to evacuate. And when you get an order, you really don't have the luxury of time and you have to move quickly. So those are some of the things moving forward that I can say and speak to related to the evacuation. Hope that answered your question to the level that you wanted.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, Tanya, there's I really want to say thank you for answering my question. This is something that's really on the mind of Louisville people. I hope if Louisville could say that was a mistake to leave Cornerstone burning for 90 minutes before because of traffic jam, it would do a lot to repair the feelings of the community. I just want to say that because I don't think anyone would logically say, I mean, rooftops in my neighborhood were on fire for an hour. You know, the first one was on fire at about 2:25 at least. And people were running out of their houses with their rooftops on fire, Sagamore style. And nobody has ever said, that was a mistake. We should have evacuated your neighborhood too. We're right across the street from the police station. I just want to say that I'm really glad. Thank you for that amazing explanation about the dispatch and your explanation that anybody can now order the evacuation of any polygon anywhere in Louisville. That is fantastic. Somebody on the ground that sees the rooftops on fire can say, do it now. That makes me feel a lot better. But I still talk to my neighbors and they say, man, I'm so afraid to go home. We have to do a little bit of reconciliation here. It was very emotionally, I mean, I'm shaking right now, I'm talking. I almost died when I found out that it wasn't Everbridge, but it was actually the order was never sent to evacuate my neighborhood until basically everyone was gone. And it hurts to think of that. And just, I hope, I'm glad technically we're moving forward operationally. I hope that continues. I just hope also as part of that, we repair our feelings about what happened a little bit. And the fact that the FLA completely left evacuations out in Louisville, we noticed that. So I'm glad we're moving forward. I'm glad we're doing this, but I just hope that at some point, you know, we're able to repair our relationship that someone decided not to evacuate our neighborhood traffic reasons. So thank you all. I'm not trying to beat anyone up here. I'm trying to be forward looking. That's a piece of this that also needs to happen. Thank you, Tanya. Sorry, this is all sweaty now, my hand's shaking. Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I appreciate that. And I just want to recognize that, you know, that concern. And I will apologize if that was a mistake or a lack of information. I mean, we were operating with such incomplete information. So I don't think that the decision was made to not evacuate because of the traffic. I think, at least from my perspective, I didn't have all of the complete information about what was on fire and what wasn't. So, I mean, I apologize for that and for not, you know, being able to have, you know, the clear picture of everything. And sometimes that happens, unfortunately. And I think some of the changes that we're making are going to help that those people who do have more information can collectively create a clear picture and say, this is what's happening here and this has to happen. So, you know, I am, yeah, just very sorry for, you know, what you're going through and feeling. And I apologize for any mistakes that were made. I also feel like everybody was really doing the best that they possibly could in this event. And so, we would like to move forward with, learning more about how we can, improve on some of these areas and also just know more about how we can work together so that we don't miss things that we maybe have missed. So, yeah. Anybody else have any?
I'll jump in. Hi there, my name is John Wilson, with Louisville Fire Protection District. So we are all human, first of all. So we didn't say, well, don't evacuate that little area or neighborhood. When we made the decision, we didn't have our zone set up at that point. When we made the decision, both my commanders and the Louisville PD, it was, we're gonna evacuate Louisville, period. And then what happened is, then we have to start looking at what neighborhoods we're gonna do first, because we can't put all the cars on the road because you'll have backup. So, yes, I understand where you're coming from. And it might have been that we asked for the evacuation and eventually it did get to the point that we got your neighborhood, but it was way down the line. There was so much going on and I was there and I was part of the evacuation of Louisville that about 12:25, I was in Superior. At about 12:45, about 12:30, I was in Superior. About 12:45, I was in Home Depot. And it hadn't crossed, it crossed at Home Depot, but it hadn't crossed anywhere else. So there was a lot of things going on that day. It was very, very fast. It was a lot of smoke. We couldn't see what was going on, but we hear you. And all these people up front are working very hard to try to correct it and to do better next time.
Okay, we'll take one more here and then we're gonna go on the phone.
I'm Les Squires. I live here in Nighthawk Circle, which is just a few hundred feet, and fire was like a horseshoe coming around, and we were spared. But the reason that my wife and I noticed that there was something happening was one of her cousins called from Frederick and said, "What's all that smoke over there?" That was our alarm. There was no other alarm in any fashion. And so my question is, I understand that one of you is, you're the head of the Louisville. Do you control that switch that turns on the siren when there's something really dangerous happening? Like if enemy airplanes are flying into this area and they're going to be coming over this area, can't you just turn a switch? Because the sound of the siren will go through every medium there is. It's not specific, and we don't have a clear picture yet, but at least we know something is happening. I was in the lower level of my home, and I wear headsets when I'm working on the computer. I didn't hear anything, and my wife came in and said, I was on the phone to Slovenia doing some consulting work, and my wife came in and said, hang up. And I said, well, give us a few more minutes. We're just about done with the phone call. She says, no, we're getting out of here. Where is the siren? There's a default value that could let everybody know that something is happening. Like right now, there's something really dangerous happening out there. It'd be neat to have the siren. Okay, all of Louisville, whether you're opt in or opt out, or you're standing on your head, or you're, whatever it is, let's get the ball rolling.
Siren, yeah. Right.
Yeah, thank you for your question. And the answer to that is kind of yes and no. There's not a switch that I can just flick to do that. It's a process in terms of communicating that information and what mechanisms we use to communicate whatever's happening. And we do that through the communication center. One of the challenges, not one of the challenges, the challenge that we had was to figure out where, based on the fire behavior, where that was going next, when we anticipated it was going to get there, and who did we need to communicate with in what order? Because this is the reality. Your safety And the sanctity of human life was our priority on the day of the fire. It's our priority today, and it's gonna be our priority tomorrow. For everybody on this panel. And for Tanya, for Mrs. Brennan, for Mrs. Minter, my heart goes out to you and my prayers go out to you, and for everybody who lost your home on that day. I am terribly sorry that you lost your homes. I can't imagine. I really can't. The closest I ever came to something like that was I lost a business when my wife and I owned a business. We lost that in the Big Thompson flood in 2013. So, but it's not the same. It wasn't our home. So I can't imagine how difficult that must be. So I just needed to say that, but I want you to understand. It's not a light switch. And it seems like in a perfect world, we could just say, hey, okay, there's an event happening, time to go, and we flick a switch. And then we can get everybody the information at the same time and what needs to happen, and it would all go swimmingly. The reality is that's not a realistic thing for us to be able to do. And I'll tell you why. Because if we just notify the entire city, there's something going on and you need to evacuate, it's going to compound the problem that we had on that day, which is everyone has to be able to go somewhere. When you say there's an emergency and you need to leave your home, what are you going to do? You're going to do the same thing that I'm going to do in that situation. You're going to get in your car, you're going to leave your home, and you're going to try to leave the area as soon as possible, as would everybody else. So the competing demands that we had there in order to protect life was, how do we do that? How do we get the information to people in a timely manner to help them get out of harm's way? But the balancing act there was, we can't do that with just a blanket message to the entire city, because we knew what would happen was we would create an insurmountable traffic jam, and we were afraid people were going to burn in their cars. So as that unfolded, we tried to do that as methodically as we could. And I understand there was still congestion and traffic problems, which we knew there was going to be. There will always be that to some degree when you have an incident of that magnitude and of that type. It was literally moving so fast that we were relying on the information from the people who were on the ground to convey that to us, so we could then push out a communication to evacuate as expeditiously but as safely as possible. I was relying on my people from the police department who were in the field, just as the fire commanders were relying on their people who were in the field. One of the things that made that very challenging was with the wind, and you all remember the wind, because I certainly do. What it was doing was, it wasn't just the fire moving from point of origin to the point in an organized fashion. When things were catching on fire, as the wind was blowing, it was ripping, burning pieces of material off of structures or fences, or everything, picking it up and throwing it and depositing it somewhere else in the city, and then starting a fire there. So it was very difficult that combined with the smoke and the wind to assess, okay, where are we right now? Where do we go next? And I assure you, we did that to the best of our ability. So we could protect life to the best of our ability, so we could get you to safety to the best of our ability. I was the one working with my colleagues in the communication center. And we were in communication with city leadership throughout this incident. I was the one that was determining and making the call of what areas we needed to get messages to and when, and how to do that as safely as possible. It was a team effort. But I tell you that to say, if you need to be angry with someone, you can be angry with me, because the buck has to stop somewhere, and I take full responsibility for that. I did the best job that I could. We all did. And I understand the pain that's associated with that. I understand there might be some anger associated with that. So if you live in the city of Louisville, you can lay that blame at my feet, and I accept that.
take an online question if they want to.
You want to say something about siren?
I just wanted to get the siren question to answer specifically to that. One of the things that the siren package has for audible warning, it has a sound and then a voice message that goes with it. The sirens in Louisville do not have a wildfire message in it. They're being considered for that. And that would then be a way that the siren then could be used more effectively in a wildfire scenario. It's pretty much set up, as you heard, these were designed and set up around flood drainages is how they were installed. But we have been in talk with Louisville and helping them with information to help make that decision. So that would increase the opportunity to use that. The other thing is it's an outdoor warning system. If you live close by, it will be an indoor warning system too, because it's that loud. But if you don't have to go very far away to have it where if your windows aren't open, if you have your TV on and stuff, you will not hear that siren unless you're outdoors. So keep that in mind. It's an outdoor system, and then you throw an 80-mile-an-hour gust wind on there howling. There's impacts of how that will cause distortion. But to your point of just even if you hear it, it will help with, getting something more. And to Steve's point, that's that layering effect. Try to get as many different ways to alert, and let's use them all. And that's how we can be better moving forward to help try to alerting the community. And that's wonderful.
Superior.
And Superior's done that also.
Putting that in, it is
They are.
unincorporated, also unincorporated Boulder County.
So we've added
so-
to a couple of places in unincorporated Boulder County. Superior is moving towards that. Allison, I don't believe it's done yet, but it's in the works.
Yeah.
So there's that piece that will help out with that outdoor warning of residents in their community.
We're gonna do one on the,
Who wants the mic?
phone and then, yeah.
I just want to quick add one thing. Just because there could be more than just Louisville community people listening to this and Superior community folks. The sirens aren't everywhere from border to border in the county. In those local jurisdictions are, number one, we're looking at, do we need to put them in other places to increase that capability? So it's really up to that local jurisdiction. And in the dispatch center, when we get that request, we obviously push it out and the capabilities of that system. But thank you for your question, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the answers.
Mayor Pro Tem, did you want to say something?
Just quickly,
Okay, perfect.
I just want to add that some of the more elderly of us, when you hear a siren, you think tornado,
Yes, yep.
and you shelter down in the basement, you don't get out. And that would have been horrible, a horrible result. The other thing that we had issues with evacuation, I know I got my evacuation notice at about 12:30 or so. Came out of the enclave and it was already bumper to bumper traffic. I could barely get out. It took me an hour and a half to get from McCaslin to the mobile home park on South Boulder Road. And it was still bumper to bumper traffic stopped because a train had come through and no street going to the east, which we were told to do was go north and east. Nobody could get through from Superior all the way through Louisville and even up north. I did a U-turn, back up South of Boulder Road and went out 76. And even then had to go all the way up to Arapahoe before I could go east to get to the evacuation center. So there was just so many mitigating factors in this, and the speed of the fire, that it wasn't you, Jeff. It was all of the issues that were going around.
Take one on the phone here.
We'll take Larry Donner. Larry, you'll have to unmute. Go ahead.
Fine. First, I'd like to make a comment on sirens, and that is that Louisville only has two. They're only allowed to test them twice a year, and on a still day, you can barely hear them. So if you really want sirens and you want them to be effective, you're going to need to put more sirens in Louisville, which everyone wants in someone else's neighborhood. So having said that, I just want to move on, and this is kind of a plea, and that is for the local jurisdictions to coordinate on their websites a single button that you can push to get you to Boulder's website with the most current information. Because prior to an individual's notification, if you see smoke and you want to know what's going on, most people go to their local website. To go to city of Louisville, it's several clicks to get to the city of or the Boulder County and try and figure it out. If each municipality and the county had a single button at the top of their website that people could click on to get the most current information, people could make early decisions for themselves and not need to depend totally on an evacuation order from the officials. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. That's a great suggestion. We've actually got a couple of our public information officers in the room, so we're writing them down. Okay, let's we'll take a couple more in the room. Okay, and then we should move on because we have to be out of here by 8 and we have more to go over. So let's see.
My name is Joanne Spears, and I just have, I have a couple of questions, but the first one, when you say incident commander, is that the officer in the field who sees fire going? It's like, we hear that, you know, somebody saw one down at 12 tribes. They're the people who can then contact dispatch and say, hey, there's a fire here. And then if, depending upon whatever else information is provided, you can then go forward. Is that correct?
So first on scene is your best answer for that.
Okay.
So whoever is first on scene, whether it's fire, whether it's law, depending on whether it's a fire or a law event, right, will depend on when fire got there. They were initially on scene before we were. They are incident commander. Then law comes in, we join forces with fire together so that we can be one command. So we're not giving separate information. Law isn't saying do this and fire saying to do that, right? We need to all work together as a team. And so then we file a joint command so that we're all, one incident commander is working together with all facets of what do we need from law, what do we need from fire.
Okay, that's great. The other aspect, and I believe this gentleman, I didn't get your name,
Mike.
From the command center. I think they call not the command center.
We're the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center.
EOC.
Right? We support them as the
Right,
incident
okay.
commander.
You listed a number of things about what you're doing going forward, and they were really great. And I'd like to be able to communicate those
Yes.
to my to a group that I'm with. Afterwards, I'd like to come up and make sure I have the right list, and the right explanation.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay, we had another question back here.
My home was on Cold Creek Golf Course, and Cold Creek Ranch. And the test of the sirens I could hear all the time, very clearly, with my windows closed. So I thought that's excellent preparation, but on the day of the fire, we didn't hear it at all. So I don't know what went wrong, but the testing was very clear and loud. Thank you.
Does anybody want to speak to the sirens and what they, I think as.
It's another,
said,
yeah, it's an incident command decision. And if they don't say sound off the sirens, they're not going to get sound off in the 911 center. So that's why they weren't used that day. They just weren't recognized to use. And part of it's because I think everyone thinks of them for tornadoes and flooding and that kind of thing. So, and there's no wildfire package to select if he called in and said, set off the siren because of a wildfire, and then they would be able to communicate that. That's what we're looking to change. So that would be a new option for the incident commanders to say, give me an Everbridge, light the zone up, go ahead, give me a wheel with it and set the siren off.
And
then all that would
by a
happen.
wildfire package is that you can only have a specific number of pre-recorded
Messages.
messages. And we have them for flood, we have them for hazmat, we do not have them for wildfire, we're working on that, so that's what you
Correct.
mean, is that then they can, you know, push that button and it'll, you know, play that specific message.
Correct.
I'm Lisa Young, I'm also in Cold Creek Ranch, had a landline, didn't get the evacuation on 108. We didn't leave until the houses were on fire across the street. Did they ever look into why it didn't get to our landline? Got to our neighbor on the same street. But not
Okay.
to us.
Steve question.
So anytime it was reported to us that I didn't get it and I should have, we looked into each and every single one of those. I'd love to speak to you afterwards so I can look back, because I can look all the way back.
We didn't get on the flood either, 2013.
Sure, so I'm happy to look into your specific situation and anybody else that's in the room or listening, if they felt they should have gotten it and didn't. What we did find from those that came to us and said, this is where I live, this was my information, tell me why I didn't get it. There were no system failures for the systems that were in place in that day. When it comes to landlines or the people that have opted in or signed up for it. What we didn't have in place at the time was the wireless emergency alert capability. So if that was an expectation, it just wasn't part of the package at the time, it is now, and it has been since.
Yeah, I said
early
it was
last year.
1:30, too late.
So we can talk afterwards and get your information. I'll get back to you on that. Anybody else that's online, please say.
Okay, we are gonna try to move on, so if you could make your question quick, and then we're gonna.
My house didn't burn, but my daughters did, and my granddaughter was there, but I have been volunteering for many years back in Florida with the Department of Police and Fire. And I volunteered for the sheriff's office as a victim advocate, and I was in the call center. So anyway, I knew something was very wrong. So I was at Davison Mesa, and I turned the police radio on, and I heard that 3 places were on fire. And I could see, and someone told me, you better go and tell your brother to start evacuating right now because this is moving really fast. So this was like an angel, and we evacuated at 1 of 3. One very bad thing, she tried to water her backyard and her fence, and she didn't have the trouble water. So, luckily, we are alive, but she knows it almost everything. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have one more. Do we have one more?
Yeah, we do. Ralph Brown.
Yes, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank the gentlemen who are presenting today. I think given the circumstances with which they were faced, they did a tremendous job, given all of the things that they were dealing with. And I just want to thank them for their service and what they've done for this community. And I really appreciate the things that they're doing to only improve. I don't know how many thousands of people were evacuated safely, and we had only 2 fatalities in what was a tremendously horrific event. And so my applause and my thanks to those gentlemen.
Thank you, Ralph.
Just a closing comment to button it up.
Yep.
So I just want to stress on the point, and I heard this earlier, and I've been doing some recovery work with other communities affected by this horrific disaster, and I've heard it loud and clear from people rebuilding. I want to know it's safer to build back. I want to have some confidence that when I rebuild, I'm not going to live with this kind of thing again. Can't promise anything, but what I can say though is that the systems are more robust. We've breaking down some barriers around decision-making operationally that will increase the time it takes for people under these harsh conditions. These disasters move fast. There's a fog, there's some disorientation to it. And the more people that have permission and feel authorized to make decisions to move people and evacuate them, that has changed. We have a faster methodology to get the alerts out. We have more platforms to get the alerts out. We have evacuation routes identified. It's hard to say every evacuation route is going to work because you don't anticipate a train popping right up in front of everyone. So part of having pre-planned evac routes can be, it's not a problem to have them, but you have to also be agile, knowing that I might encounter things, a stalled vehicle. But we have a law enforcement surges on events now. And we have this plan of getting traffic as a higher priority is knocking on doors, because people leave their home, they're going to get out. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be on knocking on doors, don't get me wrong. But once people get in their cars, they got to be moving. And that's the mixed strategy here, right? Get to as many people as we can, notify them, get them moving, make sure the infrastructure is there. 40,000 people were evacuated in under a couple hours. And I've talked to traffic engineers to see if there's a better way to manage that. The answer I got was when that many people hit the roads, they're going to encounter difficulties with traffic flow. So we're tackling those issues. It is safer, I believe. We're better, and we're constantly making improvements on the systems countywide, and we're continuing the great interactive work across police, fire, emergency management across the communities to make sure that we don't lose that collaboration around how we're planning, and then also more importantly, how we're operating. So hope that helps a little bit for those that have some fear around that. It is safer and it's getting better each day.
Are you guys going to talk about
Thank you.
evacuation?
We're
You
gonna talk, we're gonna talk a little
We'll
bit,
talk
yeah,
a little bit
so
about that, yeah.
thank you so much, Mike, for that. The other comment I want to make is one of the driving forces behind these conversations we're having and this whole, wildfire mitigation, emergency preparedness discussion with the community is because we recognize we're not west of, Boulder. And those communities are very well prepared in terms of individuals that live in those communities to know that wildfire is a reality for them. And that is not true of suburban environments because we never would have expected something like this to happen. We're not really in the wooey. Now we're in the grassland interface. We understand, we're understanding the science better. We're understanding what all of our roles are. So I appreciate Mike's comments that all the agencies are working hard around this. And also we are doing this because we also want everybody else to be working individually on what the community's role is as well. So thank you all for being here. And also, I know many of you are working with neighborhood groups and your neighbors to talk about this and see what we can all do at an individual level to be better prepared too. So that's the segue to the preparedness section that we're moving to now. And I think Monica's going to kick us off.
Yes. So hello, and yes, to echo what Megan said, you all being here is a really wonderful first step, and you're doing exactly what you can be doing to better prepare yourself and give yourself a really good foundation for being successful in making it through disasters in the future. So I'll say keep coming to these series that are going on because that's taking all the right steps for yourself. I'm going to talk fairly briefly about preparedness. This is my plug for an ongoing series that we have out of the Office of Disaster Management that's called Disaster Strong, and it's a train the trainer type of program. So I'll talk a little more in depth about that in a couple of slides, but wanted to give you a Cliff Notes bit about preparedness so that you can take that with you tonight. And if any of this sparks any interest, come to one of our sessions that we hold once a quarter. The program is out of our office, yes, and I'll talk about it in details in 2 slides. That's all you got to hang in with me for. So the first, sorry, you can go back. So the first bit about preparedness, which Steve talked about in depth, is that alert and warning piece. So you've already got a wonderful in-depth knowledge of that from coming here tonight. And that's really critical because that's going to be your first step in knowing what's going on. And to harken back to that slide, the you being that first piece is really critical, and having that trust and confidence in yourself of, we all kind of get a feeling of something feels like it's up and I don't quite know about this, really leaning into that. But then using all those other wonderful layered approaches as well. So that's that first bit, and knowing how you're going to find out something is going on. The second little bit about preparedness that I'll talk about is self-assessment and developing capacity. And that might just sound like a jumble of words. But how many folks in here, when you think about preparedness, does it feel kind of overwhelming? Right, only 2 people. Everybody else feels great about it. There you go. That is a fair thing. Right. So when we think about preparedness, oftentimes if you go to any websites or resources for it, it hits this overwhelming thing of you click on something and it takes you to another web page and then another one. You're down this rabbit hole and you can't quite remember how you got there, but it's got a lot of lists that you should probably do. So our goal as part of preparedness is really doing a self-assessment to think about where you want to start and what that can look like. That can be as simple as thinking about where your vulnerabilities are at. So you might say, I have some mobility challenges and I can't get moving super quickly. So the first step in my preparedness is going to figure out when I need to get going. So as was mentioned earlier, at a warning phase, if you have that opportunity is really great. Or knowing that you don't have reliable transportation, creating a plan where you say, I've got a buddy that's a neighbor, or I've got someone I'm going to call that can come help me with that. So doing that self-assessment to figure out where those focus areas are, because otherwise it does become this really long list. But if you start with those focus, that can get you in, and you can take small steps to kind of maintain your different lifelines and things that you would need during a disaster. I know something that I talked to a group about recently was fuel, like having that lifeline, both in the sense of like energy to power things at your home potentially, right? If we're in an extreme cold situation, power goes down, something like that, that could be one side of it, or just having fuel in your vehicle. And so something that's a minor step someone might take is saying like, I'm going to make sure I always have a quarter of a tank in my car. And that's a little thing that you can do to just start to tweak that plan and take those steps towards being more prepared. And again, there's no one size fits all. It's whatever works for you specifically, given all the factors that exist in your life. So that's the component. And then by doing those pieces, you start to develop your own capacity and capability for being able to respond and being resilient in that way. And so with plan creation, we think about two kind of overarching ideas when you create that as part of preparedness. And that is being actionable and sustainable. And so actionable is pretty straightforward. That means it has to be realistic. You have to be able to carry it out. So if my plan in a dream world was like, something goes down, I'm going to get in a helicopter and bounce right out of town. I don't have a helicopter. I don't know anyone that does. I have no resources to do that. So making sure that whatever your plan is for preparedness, it is within the scope of reality for your own situation. So there's that piece. And then sustainable. Does anyone have an idea of what we mean when we say sustainable?
Like showing.
Yes, wonderful. That's a good great. So yeah, not thinking about, oh, it's green and sustainable from an environmental standpoint, but rather it's something that you can sustain over time and keep going. Because with disasters, we never know how long that's going to last. And it's something that we want you to be able to repeat so that it's not a one and done. You did that and now you don't have that capacity to do so anymore. So that's a little bit of a cliff notes on that. We can go to the next slide. And so the components of a plan, as you think about preparing for yourself, there's three main components that we like to boil it down to make it a little more approachable. And that is having a communication plan, which we hit on how you get notified with all the alert and warning pieces. And then as was mentioned before, how you keep up to date on information. And that could be through the Boulder OEM website, that could be through reliable folks that you talk with, news, whatever that might be for you that works well. So there's that piece, and then figuring out also how you're going to communicate with others. That might be making sure you have a charging capability for your phone, whether that's a brick or a little plug-in for your car, whatever that might look like. And then a grab list, that is something that we've shifted to instead of like go bag or those types of things, because a go bag, a really critical piece of that is you have to maintain it. And so if you're not willing to maintain it, which can be challenging, life gets busy. And, you know, if you've got different medications or some kind of life component has changed and you need to add supplies, or you've got a bunch of old stuff in there that doesn't make sense, that can be just a bunch of stuff that you're having to haul around. So what we kind of shift to, and I talk about in our in-depth preparedness workshop, really focuses on like, how do you make a list that you can easily prioritize, but that is also almost modular. So if you know, I have 2 minutes versus I got 10 minutes to grab things, you can have those kind of prioritized pieces that, you know, these are my non-negotiables, I really got to get with me, and the rest of this is a little more negotiable. I could probably replace it in some capacity. So we talked in depth about that. And then evacuation, which I will not steal the show because that's going to get talked about next. But with evacuation, we really want folks to think about knowing your different routes and having different modes of transportation as well. So having a primary, and again, I know not everyone has multiple modes, but I'll use this as an example. So most folks would probably say like my vehicle or a vehicle is going to be my number one. We talked with an assisted care home, and there was a resident there who said, I just spent $17,000 on a wheelchair. I don't think anyone's coming to get me, so I'm wheeling myself out of here in my motorized wheelchair. And while it was unconventional, he had a plan for what his backup would be. So thinking about that, and not everyone I know is going to go spend thousands of dollars on a motorized small item to take yourself on out, but thinking about, you might have your primary vehicle, and then what happens if you go out and shoot, that doesn't start that day? Do you have a neighbor that you can collaborate with and kind of be each other's connection points, or other, you know, other modes and ways that you can think about that? So that's a little on evacuation. Like I said, this is the very Cliff Notes version. We can go to the next slide. So what we do is an in-depth workshop. It's offered 4 times a year, and then it can be offered by special request as well. So if there are groups that you are a part of or work with that would like this, I'm the person that facilitates it. And we go over in-depth these pieces of kind of disaster history and alert and warning. We also do a personal risk assessment, and there's like workshop components to that. And then when you leave, you have a plan, or at least the basis of a plan with you as you head out of that. So that's what we offer. It's once a quarter. Our next one is coming up on March 6th. It will be over in Superior at the community center there. And you can sign up on Eventbrite if you go to our website and click on the preparedness tab. And I'm going to work on adding this to our homepage as well. But there's a big old banner that says Disaster Strong Preparedness Workshops. And so you click that and you can register for that. And then we have an additional one in June on the 27th at Left Hand Fire, which I know is a little more of a trek living out here. But like I said, there's those offerings, and then they can be one-off by special request as well. So we hope you will join that if you would like to. And if not, you need other outlets for that, feel free to contact me as well. I can get you linked up with more information or work on special kind of side projects for that. So that is the end of my bit, and I will pass it on to Chief Phoebe to talk more about evacuation in depth.
Evacuation or?
I think it's evacuation preparation.
I'll talk about my stuff now if you want. Sure. That's fine, because it does, it actually does dovetail very nicely into Monica's. Rick. Did you pass those out? And for those who were asking earlier, what's a PAO? That's a PAO. This is that's Rick Tillery. He is Mountain View's PIO. And we have some things to hand out that will, like I said, dovetail on what Monica has there. Has some things, really just some things to think about. I'm a little bit more old school. I like to hold on to things instead of seeing them on screen. So what I was asked to talk about was how to leave what condition to leave your home in if you're going to evacuate, how that may help the fire personnel coming in. And one of the handouts we have, there's some state responsibility. There's a couple things in there. This really is specific to wildfire, and I'll go over some of those things. But the question is, if you're going to evacuate and you have some time, and let me preface that by saying that the number one thing is your safety. And if you got to get out of the house, get out of the house. What we're talking about is these are some things that you can do if you have a little bit of time that may help us when we come in after you've left, that may help us deal with the emergency. These are some things that may help you, may help the fire to not spread. We take that out. So we'll go over a couple of them. I know we're getting a little short on time. And if you were to go online and put in emergency preparedness and wildfire evacuation, you're going to see hundreds of websites. These things will be on Mountain View's website, and we can share them if you care for that, or we did print them out for you. So I want to talk about a couple of things. So if we go to the one that says emergency wildfire survival checklist, these are some things that would help us. And one of them, and this is kind of a tough one for people, especially in the world we live in anymore, but leaving your garage door down but unlocked. And one of the things that we did see in the Marshall Fire, in fact, one of the rescues that we did have to make was an elderly couple who went out to their car to try to get in it and drive off, and the power was out and they couldn't open the garage door. So they ended up trying to walk down their lane. Fortunately, one of our battalion chiefs found them walking through the smoke and evacuated them, but simply because they couldn't get their garage door open to get their car out, they were in very serious danger. So you need to be aware of how to open those garage doors when there's no electricity. Now, a lot of them have batteries, but batteries go out. And it's very simple. They're all required to have a latch in there that disconnects the garage door, but you may not have the strength to open them. But if you do evacuate, it helps us if you disconnect that, so we can simply lift open the garage door if we need to get in. That's one thing. And again, I'm not going to go over every one of these because we're a little bit limited on time. So when we talk about outside your home, one of the things that we saw in this that was a very large contributor to fire spread was patio furniture. And if you remember, if you read the FLA, you looked at a lot of the weather studies, it was the driest 6 months we've had on record. So all of that moisture and any of that stuff, the patio cushions, umbrellas, anything you have in there is incredibly dry. So one of the things you can do if you have the time, take that stuff, put it in the garage, get it out of that fire spray. It only takes us one ember on there, and now we're chasing it. And on a normal day, when we have all of our resources, a small fire from the seat cushions, nothing. When nobody's there to put it out, it just gets bigger. So these are some small things. One of the things, and this might have helped in some cases, but once we lost water pressure, it wouldn't matter. But filling up trash cans and buckets around the backyard. A lot of fires could have been handled if we could have had thrown a couple buckets on it. We didn't have any water, we lost water pressure. So some things to think about, and again, these are all situational. This is food for thought. And we were asked, what we could do. One of the things inside your home, and this is what it's been a common theme in wildland fires for years, is close all your windows. You get those sparks and stuff coming through there, you get that heat and everything. In addition to smoke damage, a couple embers inside the window is all it takes, and we've got a problem. So close all your windows. Close all the doors. So if you do get one going, it's going to limit the fire spread within the house. So think about some of these things. There's a thing about turning on lights. It was incredibly smoky that day. In the middle of the day, you couldn't see anything. And the guys that were there could tell you, you can't see. That does help a little bit. LPG, you got barbecues out there, most people turn off their gas. But for those of you who don't, all it takes is a little bit of heat to melt through that rubber supply line, and now we've got a blowing propane tank and they're helping everything else. Some things to think about. And then another one, this is I don't know how many of you are familiar with fire behavior, but one of the biggest things we deal with, in addition to the convective heat, which is all that heat in the air and the wind that's moving through, is another thing is radiant. It's kind of that heat you feel when you're kind of by a fireplace or an open fire, and you kind of feel that's what warms you. It's that radiant heat. But when that radiant heat gets up alongside your house and it's going through the windows, you may have your door closed, but that radiant heat can light your curtains on fire. It can light your furniture that's next to that on fire. Never has to have direct flame impingement. It doesn't have to have the wind. That radiant heat is enough to start that stuff on fire. So what we've constantly preached in the wildland community when that's coming on is, if you have light curtains, take them down, get them away from where they're going to get lit on fire from that radiant heat. Now, if you have heavy metal ones, that would be a nice fire block. But just some things to think about, again, if you have time. I don't want you risking your life to do these things. So these are some of the things. And again, I know we're a little stressed on time, and as Monica was saying, this is a whole day class in its own right. The other thing we've handed out is one thing that Mountain View has had on the website for quite a while, is just some things to consider when you think you're going to evacuate, and some of the timeframes that may come into. And the other thing to remember is that wildfire is on everybody's minds, but there are a number of things that you could be evacuated for. Could be a hazardous materials call, could be a tornado, could be a flood, you know. So keep in mind that when you're trying to put some of this stuff together. And I think that's all I have, and I appreciate your time. If there's any questions there to wrap up that portion, happy to answer anything.
All right. Anything? Yeah, we've got some more information, then we'll do questions.
So I'll talk a little bit more about some evacuation preparedness. I think one thing that we notice, even on a daily basis, right? We get a traffic accident at 75th and Arapahoe, or something in McCaslin and Dillon. People know one way in and one way out of their house, right? And they're like, well, I can't go this way. Well, how else can I get to my house? And it's an important factor, especially once we realized how fast these can travel, how bad traffic can get. Somebody mentioned that they had to do a U-turn, right? And went the other way down South Boulder to 75th. So it's important to start realizing and driving your neighborhood and saying, how do I get out of here? If there's an emergency, how do I get out? And is there more than one way to exit? So you might live on a cul-de-sac where there isn't two ways out. You've got one way out, and I can either go right or I can go left, and that's it. But now is the time to start thinking about, is there a bike path behind me? Is there a dirt road going to open space behind me? So start looking at some of those things of how can I get out of my neighborhood? Because traffic was a nightmare. And at the very front side of this, like Mike talked about, it wasn't high on our priority list. It was going door to door and getting people out of their house. And then we all of a sudden realized, oh, wow, now we got to move traffic to get these people out of the neighborhoods. Well, some people were stuck in their neighborhoods because they only knew one way in and one way out. So really start traversing your neighborhood, understanding different directions of how I can go. And it even spreads further than your neighborhood, your general area, that, okay, where does South Boulder Road go? What if I go east? What if I go west? Okay, 75th will take me north. Knowing the general geography is really important when it comes to being prepared for an evacuation, because you, and Chief here will talk in a few minutes about evacuation routes and whatnot. And so we might be pushing you in a direction that you don't know where you're going, right? You told me to go east. Well, I don't know what's east. And obviously in the general area of where you live, it's important to know that, to know what is around me, where can I go and how do I get out? So that's a great segue. I'll give the mic to Chief Fisher.
Yeah, you know, we can communicate what the incident is, and we can suggest to you, hey, this might be the route you might want to go. We don't predetermine those, and we don't really preset those, because it really is incident dependent. You know, a fire might behave much differently than a tornado versus a flood versus some other kind of public safety incident. We do, as we know from the Marshall Fire, it's very apparent that we've got the railroad running through town. If we had a train derailment or if we had some kind of hazardous material incident there, is the wind blowing, is the wind not blowing? There are a million different considerations that we'll have to take depending on what that incident is. And so we get questions a lot about, well, what's here, I live on X street in this neighborhood, what's my predetermined evacuation route? And the answer to that is there isn't one. When we have an incident which occurs, we will communicate to you what we're suggesting or the route that we would suggest that you take. But those are suggestions. You may get there and go, you know what, this just doesn't look like it's going to be my best route. But hey, you know what, there's another road that goes, I have to kind of wind around a little bit, but it gets me to the same place. So maybe I'm going to take that one instead. In the neighborhood where I live, there are two ways in and out of my neighborhood. But throughout my neighborhood, there's some greenbelt area, there's some paved trail area. And I know some of those trails are good ingress or egress points from the neighborhood, and some of them aren't. One of them is a kind of a little trail to nowhere that ends up at a big culvert, a big ditch. So it looks like it goes somewhere, but it really doesn't. And maybe it's future planning expansion or something. But I know that because I researched the neighborhood. So if designated roadway isn't available, I know I have other options and other ways I might want to pursue that. Yes, ma'am.
Would you take a car on some of those paths?
Absolutely. If there's an emergency.
Thinking, are they wide?
If there's an emergency and you need to get out, you get out however you have to get out. That's perfectly fine with us.
You won't get a ticket?
You are not gonna get a ticket. No.
They're not gonna pull you over. Riding my bicycle on some of them, they like know that they seem a little.
Yes, yes, sir.
I know there's a lot of political pressure to build more and more bike lanes, so just outside our neighborhood. It got pitched down from 4 lanes to 2 lanes to accommodate a new bike. And so my question is, in an evacuation, I've heard the term over and over now, you get in your car and go. I didn't see a single bicycle evacuated. Moving going east. So just from a political standpoint, I know, I'm probably not a council people here, but you know, the pressure to get these lanes choked down to 2 ways seems to be unintended consequence when something like this comes up. And so I think everybody got in their vehicle, if they could, car, and to get evacuated. And I've been through 6 evacuations in my life, not fire. But the one thing that I've noticed after a disaster is the next one where you get notification that there may be an evacuation. All hell breaks loose and all panic breaks loose. The people that shouldn't be evacuated will be evacuated. And so I can guarantee you the next traffic jam is going to be even worse. So if there's some accommodation to quickly maneuver and get contraflows going like they do in hurricane territory, so that at least you could have more lanes going in one direction and not get hung up for 2-3 hours.
Yeah, it's a great observation, and those are exactly the considerations that we're looking at and that we're talking about, because that's the point. You know, and we don't reestablish those, but I can tell you, if we're trying to move a large number of people from one area to another, we're going to pick a main arterial route. We're not going to intentionally wind you through a neighborhood that's going to take more time and be cumbersome or whatever. If you know, you want to get from one place to somewhere else, we want to get you there as expeditiously as possible. So those main arterials are always going to be probably what our primary recommendation is going to be. But again, being aware of your area, aware of your surroundings, it may open up some other things. You may find a road somewhere, you may find a pathway, or if it's a bike lane or whatever else, you might explore that a little bit and go, I wonder where this goes. I've never been down here. Maybe I'll just walk the dog instead of walking the dog where I normally walk the dog tonight. Maybe I'll walk the dog down here just to see where, just so I know what's around me. But it's the overarching message, I think, that really that we're trying to hit with this segment in particular is to think about these things in a pre-plan in advance, rather than trying to react when something happens. And then you don't want that to be the time when you go, okay, so wonder if there's another way out of my neighborhood, right? When you pre-plan, when you lay that groundwork, now you can respond to whatever the incident is rather than react, because there's a difference between reacting and responding, right? And sometimes we have a lot of time and sometimes we have a little time. So it's always best to be as prepared as possible. Can you prepare for everything and every eventuality? Absolutely not. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, the thing I got into was I knew exactly where I was going. I just couldn't move. I went down McCaslin just as the enclave was burning and coming across the street. And I got to the intersection of McCaslin and South Boulder Road. And from that point to Via Appia, 2.5 hours. I could not move. Had the fire come across, I would have to get out of my car with 2 cat crates and run. That was it. You couldn't even drive on the median because there were trees.
Right, right.
So is there like a new operational plan for traffic control?
The question is, was there a new operational plan for traffic
Like at the
control?
local level, at the coordinated level?
We're all working together in terms of communicating the most effective and efficient ways to do that. Sometimes it's there, and there are multiple components to that. There's an engineering component to it. There's an educational component to it, and we look at that on an ongoing basis. Honestly, the short answer is we're reevaluating that all the time, and we kind of play the what if scenario. That's how we train new police officers or new deputies. So when you're training a new person, we have to teach them a new way of thinking about things. And what that is planning for eventualities. So we might pull up to an intersection. I might say, okay, where are we right now? And the new officer will say, well, we're in the car. We're in Louisville. No, what's our exact location right now? Oh, well, I don't know. We tell them we got to start thinking about that. Because if something happened right in front of us, if there was an accident that occurred right in front of us, if someone came running up, pounding on the window of the car saying, hey, I need help, and you get on the radio to communicate where you are, how are you gonna do that if you don't know where you are? And it's a new way of thinking about things. So it's not exactly the same thing. But the concept is the same. It's that pre-planning, it's that kind of plan for it before it occurs. And what's the worst thing that happens in that case? Worst thing that happens is you're prepared for something that never happens. Well, that's okay, right? That's okay.
Is there?
We'll take a question online. Yeah, we had someone waiting online for a while.
I
Carol
can,
Hughes? Okay. Carol, I'm not sure your microphone is working. Do you want to unmute and try again? Unmute and unmute again.
Not mic respond, Carol, while you're trying to get that teed up.
I just wanted to add a little more clarity directly to your question. So when we recent workshop, I can't remember the exact date, last 60 days, an evacuation planning with all our police and fire from across the county. We printed up all these maps of all the polygons that we had. And the whole goal of that was to identify the primary evacuation routes across the county through those polygons. And part of that exercise work was also to identify potential traffic control points along those routes so that we would be able then to communicate. And it's not yet percolated down, but that is moving into the operational training space. So those are there, that layer has been created, and that ongoing effort is there. So we're looking at it from that perspective to do the very things that have been brought up. We have to control the traffic control points. To your point, sir, you're absolutely correct. We are seeing this in other fires across the county where people are not even in the evacuation order, and their inbound traffic is greater than outbound traffic now. Because people are going, oh heck, I'm not going to wait for them. This thing could, we've seen devastating fires. I'm getting home starting to pack. And with WIAs, they go all over the county. We have no way of controlling it when they do go out. So people are on hyper vigilant. They're very concerned. They're reacting to it. And they're moving in spaces where before they were kind of like, oh, we're good until we get an evac order. So we're seeing that. The contraflow piece to this, we don't have hurricanes. And the contraflow works well when you have time to do the traffic planning. Our disasters are very fast acting. Flash flooding occurs sometimes within an hour, hour and a half of the first drop of a rainfall, depending, as you heard the chief say, where that fire is, the atmospheric conditions, the fuel moistures, that determines how much time we have to put together an evacuation plan. And then many times you're reacting in the moment to that. And that's where the pre-existing points, get on your MDT, that's a traffic control point. That's my primary artery, protect that. Let's stop people in. We can't contraflow everything out. We don't have 3 days till the hurricane hits. So we don't have that advanced knowledge. And guess who needs to get into your neighborhood? Fire trucks, police officers, and you need to keep a lane of access in. So part of that traffic control point is not just to keep you moving out, but it's also to try to ensure ingress into the area for fire and police is also protected to be able to go in and operate. So those are some considerations. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't in all cases, but contraflow can be problematic too. We just have to, think about that, and timing is a large part of that. How much time do you have to put that plan in effect? How can you reverse it if you needed to get fire trucks in, law enforcement? And those are the things that all become part of the incident commander's decision making.
Thanks.
Hope that
Mikey.
answered your question.
Yeah, the other thing that I would say is that, our Public Works Department responded incredibly during this event. But this was also a reminder that the connections always aren't there between the emergency management folks and the Public Works. And so that's critical piece also with the signalization on the roads and how we can help with the traffic mobility when fires happen or any other hazmat disasters, et cetera. Okay, did we get the
Carol, do you want to see if you can?
Can you guys hear me now? Yes?
Go ahead, Carol.
Thank you. I lost my home. Our family lost our home at 953 Eldorado Lane in Louisville. I didn't realize how emotional I would be until after I got into this meeting and hearing what you've all had to say. It's encouraging to me that there is progress being made in identifying weak spots that caused such, I don't know, there were significant problems that day. And I realized part of my trauma is that friends who were much farther away from the fire got notifications and told, you're in pre-evacuation, you're in evacuation. And the only reason that I had information in my car as I sat with my kid and my dog trying to get away was because I was talking to friends. No notification came to our neighborhood. I live in Tanya's neighborhood, and I'm certainly not going to speak as eloquently as she, but we didn't know. And I lost my parents, and I'm an only child, and I lost my parents, and I lost every single thing that ever showed that I had a family that day. And I would have grabbed some things had we had any notice at all, and we didn't. The notice that we had came from neighbors texting neighbors saying, hey, it's pretty smoky, we might get a move on. And the fact that my friends all the way across town who were far from the fire totally had a heads up and were ready to leave. They didn't need to leave. And by the time we left, the enclave was already burning and my house burned minutes after we left. We had no idea. But my friends across town did. And it kind of just makes me feel like, well, traffic's going to be a real snarl. So we can protect these people across town. But these folks over here where the fire is are kind of already a lost cause. So let's call the folks across town and do the best we can for them. And I realize that is not anybody's thinking, but that's how it feels, is like there was some line drawn in the sand. And I know that all of you are public servants, and I value your service and your time and your commitment to our safety. And it is heartening to hear that you are doing your best to proceed in a way that's going to prevent some of this. But I don't know how it could, I don't know how you're gonna make things better. Like, no matter what, there's gonna be traffic. The traffic on McCaslin was horrible. My husband and my other child turned left when I turned right, and their traffic wasn't so bad, but how did we know? I was listening to I was scanning every AM radio station in Denver for some random, and trying to find Twitter on my phone in my car. Like, there was just nothing. And I guess part of my panic moving forward is we were so far, the degree to which we are unprepared means that we have leaps and bounds to go to be prepared. And I don't know, I'm rambling and I'm sorry. Moments like this, I mean, like, I am middle-aged, but I feel like a kid. I just feel like I don't know what to say or do, and I'm so sad and so frustrated. And I thank you for your time, and I just need to know that when we finally get to go home, we're gonna have a route out of there, and we're gonna be notified with time to grab some precious things if that's at all possible. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Carol.
Sorry, I have one thing I want to say. You don't even have to put it on. I know we got 2 minutes before we get out of here.
Right, okay.
My name is Chris. I live in Hillsborough North, and you guys have answered all the questions that I made a note to myself for. There's one comment I want to make, and I'm going to preface it by saying the teamwork that you've talked about, the breaking down barriers that you've talked about is really, really good to hear. Of all the things that happened that day, the only one that makes me mad is that somebody at Boulder OEM made a decision not to allow the state to turn on their broadcasting Amber Alert system. And that's inexcusable. And I hope whoever that was is gone, because that was ego. There was nothing else but ego behind that decision. Well, I kind of write a message or whatever about them. Or that was the only unacceptable, infuriating thing about that day, as far as I was concerned. Everybody else did the best they could. Thank you guys for being here.
We have 2 minutes. The rec center is closing, so if you'd like to ask a quick question.
I just want to say there is a Louisville Neighborhood Preparedness Roundtable for anyone in Louisville who wants to be part of the conversation. We're having conversations with our fire chief, our police chief, our city manager, and you can talk to any of us. We have reps in all the fire impacted neighborhoods, so we're trying to rep everyone's concerns and make sure that everyone's concerns are addressed as community members.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just have one quick request. Since the thing that has scared us so badly is that a lot of us got no warning at all from any of the systems you mentioned. Could we do a test message in the future? Could you send them out to make sure that we're getting them on our cell phones, on our email, on the TV, just something to test it so we can see if we are getting them?
Yes, that's possible.
That'd be great.
Okay.
I feel better.
Okay, all right. Well, I'd like to really thank our panelists for being here tonight. It was very informative, really helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And thank you everybody for joining. We do have on Superior's website and on Louisville's Engage Louisville website, you can still provide questions. So if you have more questions around this that you'd like us to respond to, we're happy to do that. And you can also reach out to myself, chief in Louisville, and also I know Mountain View would be happy to speak to any Superior residents as well, and as well as the Office of Emergency Management in the Sheriff's Office. So thank you very much.
And thanks for sitting there and taking it.